Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The only reason that anyone knows Kyle Rittenhouse's name is because he shot 3 people and killed 2 of them. Last month, Rittenhouse was acquitted on all charges after his lawyers argued that he acted in self-defense when he shot those people. But I think that most reasonable people, even those who believe that that was the correct legal finding in that case, understand the key facts of what Kyle Rittenhouse did in Kenosha, Wisconsin last August, what brought him to that moment. He was a minor, 17 years old at the time of the shooting. He took an illegally acquired semi-automatic rifle to another city that he didn't live in and inserted himself in the midst of protests and chaos. And he then took the lives of 2 people, including robbing a young child of her father. His actions are not worthy of celebration, independent of that verdict. And yet Kyle Rittenhouse is being turned into a right-wing hero. And you should see the moment that Tucker Carlson was lucky enough to meet him.
Oh, Kyle Rittenhouse! It's so nice to meet you.
It's really good to meet you.
I can't believe you're
Big
here.
fan of your show.
Well, we're fans of yours, as you know.
Yeah.
You'll have to excuse Tucker. He gets giddy in the presence of his heroes. We're big fans of you, as you know. Think about that sentence. What does that mean? There's literally nothing to be a fan of. Kyle Rittenhouse is a child who shot and killed 2 people and wounded a 3rd. That's his body of work. That's it. You're a fan of that. It's not just Fox News. I want to show you what that looked like at the right-wing America Fest 2021 taking place over the past 4 days in Phoenix, Arizona. Kyle Rittenhouse received the rock star treatment there, complete with pyrotechnics and a theme song.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's get loud for Kyle Rittenhouse.
This event, hosted by the conservative group Turning Point USA, is the kind of place where we are seeing a certain grim aspect of right-wing politics getting increasingly more pronounced. It is a sort of celebration and modeling of fundamentally aberrant, antisocial, violent behavior, like being a jerk. That's the Donald Trump MAGA model, of course. It's what turned Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado and Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia into stars. It is proven that on the right, people acting as terribly as possible seems to be the thing that makes you most adored. It's a fascinating thing to watch at some level. That's the recipe. That's the secret sauce of this current version of right-wing politics. And it's not just rhetorical. This is key. Not just rhetorical. It's not just, saying stuff that makes people upset, as you saw with the welcome for Kyle Rittenhouse. I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse is known for one thing. They are literally celebrating killing people. Now, all this comes in a larger context, and that's the broad fetishization of guns and violence on the right. A recent poll from the Public Religion Research Institute found that 30% of Republicans agreed with this statement. Because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. We know there are more and more guns in America, and they are held in fewer and fewer hands. We have more guns than people, about 121 firearms in circulation for every 100 residents, making the U.S. by far the most heavily armed society in the world. And most of those guns are owned by Republicans. 50% of Republicans personally own a gun, and 61% live in a household with a gun, compared to 21% and 30% of Democrats. Now, the right celebrates this. This has become a sort of core identity aspect. They celebrate it this week at Turning Point USA's so-called America Fest with Kyle Rittenhouse at the center of it all. And I have to say, watching that tape of him walking out and the big cheering is one of the most ominous, despicable developments in our politics in recent memory, which is really saying something because, boy, we have been full of them. Now, Turning Point USA events are also the kinds of places where you get questions about when to start killing people. This happened at an event at Boise State University in Idaho in October.
At this point, we're living under corporate and medical fascism. This is tyranny. When do we get to use the guns? No, and I'm not, that's not a joke. I'm not saying it like that. I mean, literally, where's the line? How many elections are they going to steal before we kill these people?
So, no, no, hold on. No, stop, hold on. Now, I'm going to denounce that. I'm going to tell you why.
because you're playing into all their plans, and they're trying to make you do this.
When that guy says, "I'm not joking, take this seriously," you should take it seriously. He wasn't joking. The person who responded to that questioner was the founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, who did knock down that suggestion, which is a low bar, but, you know, give him credit for crossing it. But the celebratory message around violence, I mean, coming from the right wing, coming from Charlie Kirk's group saying, "Here's Kyle Rittenhouse, guys," is very clear. Sometimes that message is implicit, sometimes it is explicit, and sometimes it's just a rhetorical flourish, just sort of laying out there. Just saw another version of it from Jesse Waters. And again, Jesse Waters is one of those people. The only reason that anyone knows Jesse Waters' name is because when he was a younger Fox News personality staffer, he was the one willing to act like a bit of a sociopath, hounding people in the street, sticking a microphone in their face and ambushing them. Now, sometimes he'd do that to famous people, which, that's fair, fine. But a lot of time, they weren't famous people. They were just being bullied by him. And that was his path to right-wing fame. Yesterday at America Fest, Jesse Waters had some instructions for those who want to follow in his footsteps. He described the way to ambush interview Dr. Fauci, to catch him in a lie about the origins of the coronavirus. And just like everything else about this stuff, it is laced with violent rhetoric.
I need a lot of help. Now you go in for the kill shot. The kill shot with an ambush, deadly, because he doesn't see it coming. This is when you say, "Dr. Fauci, you funded risky research at a sloppy Chinese lab, the same lab that sprung this pandemic on the world. You know why people don't trust you, don't you?" Boom! He is dead. He is dead. He's done.
He's dead. That's the kill shot, the question about the Chinese lab that spread COVID, which, by the way, that is extremely, extremely undetermined at this moment, but you knew that. Now, of course, again, in the immediate context, on that sort of Vegas-style stage where you're sort of basking in the adoration of a lot of young people who maybe want to grow up to be a sociopath like you, that language is metaphorical. But Dr. Fauci has had to have security as a result of language and threats like this. And of course, these words come in the broader context of everything being said and done on the right, and they were spoken at this America Fest event where they are celebrating Kyle Rittenhouse's literal kill shot against two people. It's hard to see and hear all of that and not hear something that sounds a lot like "you're next, lib." The right's celebration of violence, the fetishization of guns, which is, you know, there's a whole lot to say about where that's coming from. But the fetishization of guns and the celebration of violence is one of the most ominous developments in American politics. And sometimes it's been happening for a long time, but they are putting it now on full display. Shalani Cobb is a staffer at The New Yorker, professor at Columbia University School of Journalism. Linda Chavez served as the highest-ranking woman in the Reagan administration, and they both join me now. Linda, I want to start with you because I have noticed something just in interactions with people on social media about Kyle Rittenhouse, that it's a little bit of a wedge among conservatives. It's similar in some ways to the vaccine. You know, there's a lot of conservatives who are like, "I'm a Trump person, and, you know, I hate the liberals, and I don't like Fauci, but I got the vaccine." And then there's people who are like, "No, it's a secret plot by, you know, George Soros." And with Kyle Rittenhouse, I have seen, like, there's a lot of conservatives who are like, obviously we should not be celebrating what this person did. Just common sense. And I just am astounded. I mean, I know that exists, but I am astounded that that is not the obvious consensus view of people on the American right.
I agree with you. And by the way, if this Kyle Rittenhouse, the Tucker Carlson, Charlie Cook Kyle Rittenhouse, had been the young man who had testified on the stand in his own behalf, I don't think he would have been acquitted the way he was. I think he was acquitted. Yes, I think he did have the law on his side, whether you agree with the way the law is written or not. I think he did have the law on his side. But he also was a sympathetic figure. He seemed to be genuinely sorry over what he'd done. And soon after, he seemed to think that, you know, he shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have been having an AR-15 or whatever other semi-automatic weapon he had on the streets. But now, he's become a cult hero. And my guess is, we're going to see more of this. I think it's a real tragedy. It's a tragedy for Rittenhouse as well as for the conservative movement.
Jelani, you've written a lot about sort of gun culture and the role of the gun and the sort of fetishization of the gun as instrument of politics. What do you see when you see this rock star introduction?
Well, I mean, there are two things, Chris. The first is, I want to be consistent. I've written a lot about juvenile justice and the way that our system treats young people who have not psychologically developed into adulthood and cognitively developed into adulthood. And in order to be consistent with that, the thing that I have to say, I'm horrified that there is this fetishization of guns and this valorization of killing, people under the circumstances in which they were killed. But the other thing that strikes me is that this is profoundly unhealthy for a young person.
Yes.
That this is, we know about the psychic toll and the emotional toll that celebrity takes on young people. It's a well-known story of the child star who is very poorly adjusted as an adult. Compound that with being a celebrity for killing two people and shooting a third. I just think that this is wrong. I think it's immoral and ethical in ways that go across partisan lines. About the firearm part of it specifically, though, this is about him realizing an objective, which has been fairly well stated on the right for a long time. There's a great book on this, Richard Slotkin's Gunfighter Nation, talking about the psychology of the firearm and how it relates in American history. But just as a quick point of it, a decade ago, this was George Zimmerman, and he received a similar kind of treatment. And so this is what goes to the core of the values of people on the right, the increasingly reactionary and violent right.
Yeah, I'm glad you said what you said to Jelani in that first part too, because I feel the exact same way. And in fact, when he was acquitted, I tweeted something about how I hope he takes the opportunity to recognize what he did was awful and atone for it and change his life and do something that makes the world a better place. I think people, were angry at that because they felt a lot of rage at the injustice they felt of the verdict. But that core point again, to put the politics aside for a second, this is a sick spectacle. This is a very sick spectacle with a lot of people who should know better, who don't. I mean, watching Tucker Carlson, Linda Chavez, quiver and squeal in delight, you're a grown-ass man. Grow up. Right. You're a man, and you're groveling at the foot of this kid because of the people he killed?
Yeah, no, it's really scary. I mean, there is this, very strange idea of masculinity that seems to prevail on the right. And Tucker Carlson, I think, exemplifies it. It really is unfortunate, I think, just as a matter of public policy. I mean, Ronald Reagan, who was a real man, was someone who had sensible views on gun control. He was opposed to the open carry law in California. For example, he did not want, there was a law that was passed actually by the state legislature, which he signed, which made it illegal to open carry in the state of California. And he came out for other sensible laws. And the NRA itself used to be all about gun safety, not anymore.
Well, and I should note, I think Reagan signed that after the Black Panthers started open carrying on the Capitol steps, which I think points, Jelani, to the subtext of all of this, right? Which is you hear it all the time, all this stuff. When do we get to use the guns? It's the narrative here is, it's moved from we like these and this is our way of life, hunting, fishing, I learned to shoot with my dad, all that stuff, and that stuff's still there, to explicitly, no, we have these to turn against our fellow citizens when the time comes. And that is that's increasingly explicit, not just implied.
I mean, it's Charles Bronson. If we go, back to the 1970s, it's Bernard Goetz. If we are familiar with the incident in the 1980s, I mean, there's a long lineage of this. But the other thing that I think that's increasingly important is that the rhetoric has changed from being simply about self-defense to a kind of preemptive self-defense. It's very quickly, if you think about what ties Rittenhouse, Zimmerman, in the Trayvon Martin case, and the death of Ahmaud Arbery together, is that all three of these incidents involved people who were going out to protect property that was not theirs.
Yeah.
And so this is fundamentally about the idea that you can construe self-defense to mean anything, and you can proactively pursue people and still say you were defending yourself.
Jelani Cobb and Linda Chavez, thank you both for sharing your perspectives tonight. I really, really appreciate it.